Casserole, Louisiana. I'm Chef John Folse, welcoming you to this great state of ours. These beautiful plantation homes reflect the fascinating history of our culture and cuisine, and I'd like to share this story with you. Why not join me and some of my friends as we visit the plantation homes of our state and cook up another great Taste of Louisiana?
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Louisiana Gold and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products. Additional funding is provided by the Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, Gumbo, Etouffee, Jambalaya, Beignet. Come pass a good time in Louisiana and say things you've never seen before.
Just the fact that New York architects Drake and Anderson were called upon to build this plantation home in southeast Louisiana tells us that something about this mansion was going to be a little different. Built for Daniel Sanders in 1885, this colonial revival home is not quite Greek revival, but at the same time, not Victorian. There's no plaster here, no Louisiana cypress, and no Mississippi River red clay brick. Instead, this 12,000 square foot home is built totally out of hearth pine, milled, constructed, and yes, grown right here on the property. And there's a lot of other features like this double staircase. I'm Chef John Folse. Welcome to Amite, Louisiana, and to beautiful Blythewood Plantation. The original Blythewood was built by Raleigh Self on a 3,000-acre Spanish land grant prior to the Civil War. This home burned, and it was Daniel Sanders' dream to rebuild it. James Dahlstrom, a New Orleans contractor, oversaw the construction of beaded ceilings, wainscoting, and this beautiful double staircase in the main entrance hallway. Descendants of the family told me of lavish day-long parties held in this huge double parlor with its 15-foot ceilings and wonderful period antiques. Every room in the home has at least one fireplace with pine and cypress mantels, unlike any I've seen in any other Louisiana plantation. I was lucky enough to not only visit with Nora Butler, the cook at Blythewood, for over 20 years, but to also sample her southern fried chicken and cornbread. She was more than agreeable to share her recipe and went on to say that she wouldn't even fret because no young kid like me could ever cook chicken and cornbread in her time-honored fashion. Only years of experience can teach a cook that. And you know, Nora, I agree 100%. And I do agree because that chicken and cornbread was unlike any I'd ever eaten before. And I sat in that kitchen with Nora for about 2 or 3 hours and relived a lot of the stories of cooking in and around Amite, and what a fascinating lady she is. Now, you have to think of the town of Amite. It's in Tangipahoa Parish. That's in the southeast corner of our state. And the Office of Tourism has divided the state of Louisiana up into 5 equal little areas, and each of those areas are culturally different. Of course, the architecture is different. The people who live there and the foods we eat obviously are going to be different in those areas. So when you're coming to Louisiana to look at all of these beautiful plantations or tour our gorgeous state, stop at some of these little roadside travel houses. You're going to be able to pick up maps and brochures. Or, hey, just give me a call. I'll tell you how to get there. This is a great state to visit, and every one of those little areas are going to have a totally different look at Louisiana, and you're going to enjoy it, I know. Now, what were the foods that were created by the Sanders family over at Blythewood and Amite? Well, down in my cutting board is a wonderful pork roast. Now, if you can imagine that this is a Boston butt, but in the early days, they would have probably used the whole leg of the pork with the shank on. They would have probably cut it off at that point, took off the heavy skin, and would have had a really wonderful roast. And the way they would have seasoned it, coming from not only the English territory, but getting some of that French influence out of different parts of Louisiana that surrounded Tangipahoa, they would have obviously stuffed it with a lot of great seasonings. And in order to stuff it, we have to just go ahead and slice some little holes down in here. And I got this recipe while I was sitting in the living room there talking to all of the family members and At the same time, the lady who's going to join me in the kitchen a little bit later, Allie Hyde, she was there, and she's been a neighbor right down the street, and she knows a lot about what happened there, and she helped me find this recipe. Now, once all of this is cut up and I've got my holes for seasoning, I'm going to make my little stuffing, and I want you to look into this bowl at all of the things that's going to go into the pork roast. I have some thyme and basil. I have some sliced green onions. Here you see some sage. I've got salt and cracked pepper, garlic, of course, and some more fresh herbs. But I want you to use whatever herbs you like in cooking, because that's what's going to make this roast really taste like it came out of your own kitchen. And that's the most important thing, I think, in cooking, is that as people come to visit with you, they know that you cooked the roast. Even if we borrowed, Nora Butler or Allie Hyde's recipe, it doesn't really matter. We'll have our own touch in it. So right into these holes now. Remember, I have the salt and pepper in here, so I'm going to stuff all of these wonderful seasonings right down. I've cut probably, about 10 or 15 holes down in here, and I'll push it in with my finger, get all of that nice garlic flavor, all of that fresh herbs, all of these wonderful, wonderful flavors of southeast Louisiana as well as other parts of our state. And again, make sure it's really well stuffed, because as this roast cooks, just think of how juicy pork is. Pork, all of that juice as it starts to cook, will start to run all through the roast and baste it and carry these seasonings all the way through. Now, once we have that done and stuffed nicely, I'm going to go ahead and season the outside with a little bit salt like this, just a touch of salt, a little bit cracked pepper. I'm going to put a little Louisiana pepper sauce on top of it to give it just a touch of spice. And then, of course, I can add a little Worcestershire sauce to help with the browning in the pot. I can either pot roast this on top of the stove, or I can bake it in the oven, either one. And then I'm going to surround the roast with all of the great flavors of Louisiana. But in my black iron pot, I'm going to put a little touch of oil, because I just want enough to kind of start searing the roast. Whether I cook it on top of the stove or in the oven, I need just a little bit down there to seal the bottom of that roast. I'm going to pull this beautiful piece of meat. This is about 6 pounds, by the way, so this will feed. Well, listen to that sizzle, huh? Let me kind of kick that up a little bit for you. That sizzle really starts to sear the bottom of the piece of meat, the Boston butt, and then I can go into it with the rest of the things that's in the bowl. And I want you to look at this for a minute also. I have here some fresh garlic down into the bottom of my old wooden bowl here. I have sweet potatoes, which is going to give it a really nice sweet flavor. Apples, of course, apples pick up all of that oil and fat in the roast. And then some onions and rosemary, one of the things that I stuffed with. So I'm going to put these all around the outside of the roast. These apples will actually pick up about, their own weight plus in the fat that's coming out of that roast. Always put apples in your roast pot. So surround it, put all of this wonderful clove garlic all around like this, and some quartered onions. Kind of nice all of those colors look too. And then I'll break my rosemary sprigs. This is a real pronounced flavor, so I'm going to put just enough of it in there. Oh, I wish you could smell this already. It smells great, and it's only been cooking for 1 minute. Now what I'm going to do, put a touch of stock, just a little bit beef stock. I can use chicken stock, and this will help tenderize the roast. And then I'll go ahead and cover it with this lid. Now I can go into a 375-degree oven, and I can cook it in there for about an hour and a half covered, then take the cover off for the last 30 minutes to brown it nicely. Or move it to the back burner of the stove and turn the heat down to simmer and let it pot roast for about 2 hours. You will have an aroma around the house that'll bring in the neighbors, I guarantee you. So I'll move this off of the fire because I have one already done that I want to show you what it looks like. And let me bring this here. Look at this roast. If you can imagine serving this to guests coming into the house. Look at that beautiful roast. And of course, again, I can touch up some garnishing with a little bit of that real nice fresh chopped carrots. Isn't that a nice roast? The pork roast from Blythewood Plantation in Amite. Okay, another dish that I just happened to talk about, and you can imagine 20 family members who's been here for years and years sitting in one room talking about cooking and sharing recipes. They were telling me about an okra and black-eyed pea casserole that they did. It was a vegetable casserole, and I tried it out, and it was wonderful. Now, I want you to look at this. This is all of the ingredients that went into that casserole. You can see the okra here. This is sliced already, but here's the whole okra that came over from the Congo in the 1600s with the Africans. They brought the seeds with them. And, of course, here's the black-eyed peas. The Africans also brought this, and they called it congri. And a lot of dishes in Louisiana today use congri or black-eyed peas. And here's the tasso, the flavored ham of the Spanish, and, of course, the Creole tomatoes from New Orleans. So in my skillet here, I'm going to put a little bit more of this oil. I'm going to use a buttery flavored oil this time to give it that really nice buttery flavor, low cholesterol, of course. And I'm going to add the trinity of flavors. I'm going to add some onions, celery, and bell pepper. And another interesting thing I think about Louisiana cooking is no matter what region of the state you're in, you're going to see a lot of vegetable seasonings going into our pot, regardless of whether we're cooking meat, seafood, or vegetables. That's right, even vegetables. We're going to put vegetable seasonings in before we start to cook it. So I'm going to saute the vegetables around. This is onion, celery, bell pepper, garlic. Saute that for just a second. And then I'll add the tasso. I could add smoked sausage. I could add bacon. I could add ham. Any of those things, but that's the Louisiana ham from the Spanish. The tasso comes from the Spanish word tasajo, meaning dried or cured beef. So that's what's going in here for extra flavor. I'm going to put in some of these wonderful Creole tomatoes. Canned tomatoes will do just fine. Just open up a can of chunky tomatoes and drop them in. Saute this for a second, and then I could add the okra. Now, I'm going to put in okra that has been sliced, and kind of, as you can see here, it's about 1/4 of an inch in size, and all the seeds are left in. Of course, you can get okra today in the can. You can get it in the store frozen and sliced, but a lot of roadside markets will have fresh okra in season, and you ought to try to get the fresh okra whenever possible because there's nothing like it. And as I said, okra not only gave Louisiana's premier soup its name, gumbo, because the Africans called it Guinea gumbo. That was the name of the okra plant when they brought it over here. But it gave America a new vegetable because there was no vegetable such as okra in America until they arrived. Okay, once all of these things are sauteing, now I can add my congri or my black-eyed peas. And use any peas in this dish. It'll be fine, but the black-eyed peas and the okra just seem to fit perfectly into this dish since they came to America with the Africans many, many years ago. Now, to finish this dish, you can imagine all of those great flavors sauteing together. I'm going to add a touch of chicken stock, just a little bit, to tenderize the black-eyed peas. Again, if you buy them already cooked, you don't have to cook them quite as long if they're in the can, parboil, or whatever, frozen. Now, I can season with a little bit, touch of garlic, salt and pepper. I'm going to put a little sprinkle of salt, a touch of cracked pepper down in there, and I could put any spice too. I could put some fresh basil in here if I wanted to. I could chop some thyme, whatever. All of those flavors would go together really nicely in this dish, and we would serve it as, I'll say, a casserole. We could even put this in the oven and bake it for a couple of minutes with some breadcrumbs on top. It would be a wonderful, wonderful accompaniment to that pork roast. Very southern, very traditional here in Louisiana, and obviously a dish that we have all year long, even though we see it on our New Year's Day table more often than any other time of the year. So that's about it. I would let this cook here for a couple of minutes. Naturally, I have one already done that I want you to see how we played it up. So I want to show you this. Look at this beautiful bowl. I should say this gorgeous bowl because it's a wonderful antique as well. And this is the black-eyed peas. You can see the fresh okra here. And again, I can put some nice spice on here like this. I'll put a little parsley, a touch of green onions, and what a magnificent accompanying dish to that wonderful pork roast that you just saw come out of the oven. Okay, I'll move this out of the way. Now, what other dishes did we talk about at Blythewood that afternoon? Well, we talked about, I bet, 50 different great dishes that originated right there in the Amite, Tangipahoa area, because that's a very English countryside. And of course, there's a lot of English influence, but when you think that the Spanish and the French and the Germans and the Italians surrounded that parish, just think of those influences coming into the foods of Amite, as in other parts of our state. This is one of them, though. This is one of the great recipes that I found. This is a terrine of chicken and tarragon. Again, using the herb tarragon and boiling the chicken, deboning it, and then using some aspic or natural fat to go ahead and make this work for you. This here, oysters Diablo. There's a great oyster festival right down the road in Independence, Louisiana every year, and these oysters have been chopped up and mixed with all types of seasonings, onion, celery, bell pepper, breadcrumbs, and of course everybody has their own idea about how the dish ought to be done, then put into an oyster shell and baked at about 350. Oysters Diablo from the Amite area. Just a beautiful dish, and all great dishes from Blythewood Plantation. Now, I told you about my buddy Allie Hyde, who was coming to visit with me, the neighbor of the plantation. How are you doing? Hi. Boy, do you look nice today. I love that color.
Thank you.
I shouldn't say today. You always look nice. How's everything in Amite?
Great.
How's all my buddies over there? They doing okay?
Come back to see us. We want you back.
Do you remember that day? I keep mentioning it. We were all sitting in the parlor of Blythewood. How many people? We must have had, what, 50 people there or so, huh?
A lot. I don't remember exactly.
Oh, we had so many people there, and we were talking about all the great recipes that the family had cooked over the years. And at least 5 or 6 people said, John, you have to try my strawberry shortcake recipe, because strawberries are so famous in that area. And I do have the sliced strawberries here, and I want to show everybody one of the recipes for strawberry shortcake. This is the sliced berries. Aren't they pretty? These are really...
Look like our Klondike.
Yeah, I think these are Klondike. There's also tangy and a couple other berries in that area. But that's the biggest berry growing area of the state of Louisiana. I think the Tangipahoa area, a lot of strawberries. Strawberry capital of the world in and around that area. Here's some sugar. Go ahead and sprinkle me in a little bit sugar there. Just sprinkle about 2 nice spoons on the sliced berries. I'm going to put a little grenadine. This is just a little red sweetening liquid that is really good to give it the bright color. A touch of brandy. Right there would be real nice. And, of course, you can use rum or just leave out the liquor altogether if you want to. You don't have to have it in there. Now, stir this up for me, and I'm going to get the strawberry shortcakes, which I have already made. This is a very simple shortcake recipe, and I have a great recipe for this. It's just a cookie recipe is all it is. And you bake the cookies kind of flat. They're a bread. When we talk about shortcake, we talk about a bread recipe, basically. How about taking that ladle and putting some of that right on top of these berries? I have to show everybody how this looks. There you go. Pour it right on top of there. Looks great, huh? What I'm going to do. Put my favorite topping here. Oh, tell you want to stop and eat one of these right now?
I don't know if I can stand it.
Well, just beautiful. That is wonderful. That's it. You can just throw some more in there. I like extra. There you go. Isn't this just beautiful? I want everybody to just take a look at that. That is a gorgeous, gorgeous recipe for strawberry shortcake from Blythewood Plantation. Just magnificent. Okay, how about having a seat right here? And we're going to chat a little bit more about Blythewood and about all those great stories that were told that day. I tell you, what a nice time we had. Now, you moved right next door to Blythewood about, say, 40 years ago, so you've seen a lot happening there. What was your original impression of the house when you moved to town?
Beautiful, typical Southern mansion, typical antebellum home, in need of repair at that time, as were most homes at that time, a good many. Well, very impressive.
I think right after World War II, in fact, a lot of the big houses, a lot of the houses that had that importance really had been in the same families for so long they were in a state of disrepair, and I guess Blythewood was no different. Huh?
Right.
How important a home was Blythewood in the area? Did people think of it as a very important structure?
Oh, it's probably the largest structure in our area. The largest home, probably. Very impressive family. The Sanders family, there were 9 children in the family. And they were all businessmen, community leaders, educators, pharmacists. very successful family came from that beautiful home.
Somebody was telling me that just about, and I shouldn't say every important business in Amite because certainly that wouldn't be true, but somebody was saying the majority of very successful businesses dating back many years are from that original Sanders family. Is that right?
That's true.
So they must have been very important. Somebody told me also that the house was open, and when you sit and talk to that many people, you know, when you sit and talk to 50 people, everybody's giving you different pieces of information. But someone in the room that day was telling me that the Sanders family, in addition to being a wealthy family and people with a lot of prestige, they were telling me that that the family was very generous, that they would open up the house during hard times or whatever for the community.
I think one of the stories told that day, during the Depression, particularly maybe at the time, Amite had a terrible fire. Many people suffered. And I think Mr. Sanders took people into the home. He opened his home up to people, the unfortunates, who had no place to go. They lived in his home. And he had to care for those. So
he opens his house, and they said that the men were put upstairs, the women downstairs. He fed all of them. I can't imagine somebody being that generous, but I guess he was.
A great thing to do.
His last daughter, 9 children, his last daughter lived in that home until the late 60s, and she was an interesting character, right?
Miss Adeline, a very interesting person. Talented, a pianist, loved her cats. She became very reclusive toward the end, but drove her Studebaker, her little Studebaker with the rumble seat in the back, drove it around the community in the area. And she lived alone for several years and with her cats.
You know, I think every town in Louisiana, as well as probably the rest of the country, has a story of a house like that where a reclusive widow or somebody may have lived in, and it was overgrown trees. It was kind of dark. The kids were afraid to go onto the property because they didn't know what was going to happen. And it seems that that's pretty much the way it was with Miss Adelaide there.
Oh, right. We didn't permit our children to go over there and play. We were afraid.
The Kennedy family now, they came over in the early 70s. They were also original members of that land grant, that 3,000-acre land grant, and they came in the 70s, and they started to renovate the home, so they did a lot of changes to the house.
Oh, that was a thrill to us, to see that beautiful home being renovated, and they brought it back to life. It was a delight for the whole community when the Kennedys took over Blythewood.
Now, when they got it, it was pretty much in a state of just, I hate to say disrepair, because it was worse than that. They said the columns were in the front yard, the roof was damaged. Was it in that bad a shape?
They had to replace the columns, I believe, in the front porch and the roof. Quite extensive repair, I think, was done to it.
But they not only brought the house back to life, they threw lavish parties. They were telling me about, I said, parties that lasted a day at a time in those parlors. They were big party throwers, right?
Right now. Do you mean the Sanders family or the Kennedy family?
No, the Kennedy family.
The Kennedy family. They have wonderful parties now. They've opened the home. They've brought back the warm Southern hospitality to Blythewood.
It is open to the public now.
Open to the public. They have weddings there, weddings, receptions. They do charitable things in community functions and well, DAR, to name a few, Friends of the Library. They keep it active, and they have a wonderful Christmas party each year.
Well, I'll tell you what, maybe I'll get on the mailing list. I'll
see what I can do.
I heard some great stories about the Kennedy family. Once the house was renovated, coming back in and opening it up to the public and getting the whole community back into that house and bringing it back to life after having been shut down for so many years. Now, it is open as a bed and breakfast today, and not only that, but as you say, there's weddings and etc. But if somebody just wanted to go and have a romantic dinner for two, they could probably go there into that beautiful dining room as well.
You could do that. They have the Valentine champagne dinner or whatever. I think you could. All you have to do is make reservations.
Well, great. I'm going to do that. And thank you so much, Allie, for coming and sharing those neighborly stories with me. I appreciate it. And I'm going to see you all soon in Amite, okay?
Great.
And thank all of you for coming by as we continue to cook up more of these Taste of Louisiana. Let's take a look at some of the food over here and see if I did a good job on Amy cooking, okay?
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Bruce's Yams and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products. Additional funding is provided by the Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, Gumbo, Etouffee, Jambalaya, Beignet. Come pass a good time in Louisiana and say things you've never seen before.
Chef John Folse's Plantation Celebrations, Recipes from Our Louisiana Mansions, is a full-color 335-page book containing food history, recipes, and over 150 photographs from these southern landmarks. For your copy, send a check or money order for $28.50 to Louisiana Public Broadcasting, 7860 Anselmo Lane, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810. Or use your credit card by calling toll-free 1-800-973-7246.